Hello and welcome to our first lesson using the flipped methodology. We're going to start off with a quick video that's going to do some basics on democracy. We're going to go on and talk about some contemporary theories of democracy and the traditional theory of democracy. These are all discussed in the last third of chapter 1. All right, let's talk a little bit about democracy in general. We'll start off with a quote. Some of you might be familiar with this quote. It goes back to the very roots of democracy. The foundation of our system is, of course, I'm sure you already know, is grounded in the Greek system from the city-state of Athens. And this quote is from Pericles. And again, Pericles led Athens at the time of its golden age. And it talks about our constitution. Their system of government is called a democracy because it puts power in the hands of the few, or not in the hands of the few, but in the power or the hands of many. Another quote that will help wrap your mind around the concept of democracy is from someone you're probably familiar with. And again, most of you have already guessed by taking a look at this slide that is Abraham Lincoln. All right, and this statement is actually from the Emancipation Proclamation. Democracy. A general definition, or something that you can basically kind of ground your idea of democracy, is the means of selecting policymakers and organizing government so that policy represents and responds to the public's preferences. A little different from some other forms of government. If we take a look at autocratic systems, monarchy-based systems are going to be very different from this system of democracy. And at the time, the Greek system of government was very different from many of the other kingdoms, civilizations, and dynasties at the period before and after. All right, democracy comes from the break of two words, all right, demos and kratia, which is the people rule. So there's your basis of democracy. Actually boils down to two words that say the people rule. And again, in a democracy, a true democracy, citizens are going to be directly involved, all right, in that original form of democracy. And that's called a direct democracy. That's the first type of democracy, all right, direct, where people, citizens, are going to be those making those decisions and running government. And that's what you'll see in the Greek system, all right. You'll see a change. We don't have a direct democracy or a system based on direct democracy. Our system, the actual workings of our system, are much more similar to the Republic of Rome. And we're going to elect representatives. All right? And our system is called, or can be called, a number of different things. A representative democracy, a republic, or a constitutional democracy. And again, you'll see there that this is a system of linked government where people still form the foundation of ultimate power in the system, but the day-to-day workings of governments, we delegate or we give over that power to some elected representatives. All right, characteristics. All right, characteristics of democracy. We have individual freedom and liberty. You know, a lot of people will point to our Bill of Rights. We have majority rule with minority rights. The majority has the power, but the minority still has a say and has some ability to influence what that majority rule is going to be able to do. And we will talk about in detail in the coming weeks and days about our separation of powers and the checks and balances between our three branches. We'll spend a good bit of time talking about Madison and the Madisonian system of preventing tyranny. Democracies are going to have free elections, so they're going to be grounded on the idea of each person, one vote. All right. We also have a political party system where there are no limits. You can join any party that you wish or create a party of your own, and that's all up to you in a democratic system. Democracy thrives, or democracy needs, a favorable economy to survive. If you look at democracies around the world, democracies that struggle, all right, and there are many democracies that have struggled and failed throughout time. One of the big issues with democracies failing are weak economic systems. This is something we'll touch on in comparative government. Education. If you're going to have a democratic system where the people are going to have ultimate power, they have to be educated. All right, they have to have access to education, they have to have access to news and information in order to make decisions and formulate opinions. A civil society, this might be a new term for you. When we talk about a civil society, these are professional organizations, professional groups that people belong to. For example, I'm a member of the National Teachers Association, or your parents are members of, let's say, the bar, okay, or the American Medical Association. Those are examples of civil society. You will find those systems of relationship in democratic systems. All right. In order to be successful, democratic systems are going to have these facets. What are some challenges to democracy? Increased technology. It's tough for average citizens to make informed decisions because of the amount of news, information, and distraction that is out there. Democracy is also hindered by limited participation. The United States is a prime example where you would think we'd have very high participation in our elections, but we have very low voter turnout, and probably the greatest action that most citizens are going to take are actually to vote in presidential elections every 4 years. Rising campaign costs are also an issue. It's very expensive to participate and run for a representation, a position of representation, and that's at all levels. We can take that all the way down to a school board level position, a state delegate position here in the state of Virginia, a House of Representatives seat, which kind of begins at about $1 million per race, or even a Senate seat, which basically begins around $5 million and could go as high as $30 million for those seats. And we also have a very diverse population. We have a lot more views. We have weaker coalitions. And again, those minority groups here in the United States, as they continue to grow, are going to gain more and more influence. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about democratic theories. There have been different theories of how democracy works, and those have taken shape over time, each addressing different questions of who has power, who influences policy. Traditional theory of democracy, and this is the long-held traditional idea of how democracy works. And there's just some basics here. Everyone has the right to participate. The traditional theory is either going to have direct representation like the Greeks, or representative participation like the Romans, or like the American system. You're going to have a direct situation where the people are going to approve policy themselves. We do have a little bit of that here in the United States. If you look at New England and some of the small town or town meeting formats that you'll find in New England, or you'll have a representative system where you'll have elected officials acting on behalf of their constituents. And again, the United States is definitely not the only democracy in the world, and we're different. We're a federal system. You'll find, as we study in comparative government, for example, the United Kingdom is a democracy, but their system is different because it's a parliamentary system. Bottom line, again, doesn't matter what kind of system you have, people have to have access to information in order to make sound decisions. There are three contemporary theories of democracy that we're going to talk about, and they really focus on the distribution of political power in a system. We're going to talk about the elite theory, the pluralist theory, and the hyperpluralist theory. All right, the elite theory is also known as class theory. The elite theory puts forth the idea that society is run along class lines, where the rich and the wealthy are going to have more power in the system. Okay, for example, here in the United States, more than a third of our nation's wealth is held by about, or a little bit less than 1% of the United States population. Again, to go along with this idea, only the favored and powerful are going to be able to make decisions or have power to make decisions. And again, a lot of times, this group might be out of touch with the common or the general population. All right, so bottom line, money equals power, and big business is going to have a lot of influence on how the system operates. All right. Insiders are going to run government, and we can tie this to a great example. When Eisenhower left office, in the late 1950s, when we get to that pivotal 1960 election, he talked about the power of the military-industrial complex and how the normal common person in the United States in general should be fearful of big businesses and defense contractors and all of those different elements of the Cold War buildup. We're going to have a negative effect on the American system. Second, we have pluralist theory, and this is grounded in the idea that the groups, special interests, and groups of interested persons are going to hold the most power in our system. The pluralist theory, many are going to compete for power and control. Small groups with shared interests are going to influence public policy. They're going to be organized, and they're going to push their interests to lawmakers. So they're going to use that group mentality in order to push through what they would like or would like to see in policy. A great example is that individuals in a system are kind of like fingers on a hand. If the fingers are working individually, you're not going to have the ability to move large objects. I mean, you can do things, you can poke, you can prod, you can pick up if you have a few fingers. But again, if you're really going to have a full working system, you're going to want to use all of those fingers together. Using the thumb, 4 fingers, you can grab, you can lift, you can move, and that is going to have much more impact than individuals. Some examples of some different groups that are going to have large interests in our system. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the NRA with some of the events of the last year, the National Organization of Women, the American Association of Retired Persons, United Auto Workers Union. These are all examples of interest groups that are going to be deeply involved in this pluralist theory of government. The view in a pluralist system that no single interest group, because there's so many in competition, are really going to dominate. They're going to have areas that they're going to have more strength, or they're going to be weak in different areas. So you're not going to have one dominant interest group for all areas. Bargaining and compromise are essential to the system, just like it's essential to the overall system. And it's really an optimistic outlook of our democratic system, and it's really grounded, again, in this idea of healthy competition between groups. Hyperpluralist theory is another view or theory of democracy where groups are going to have power, but it's really kind of the critique, or it's the negative view of pluralism. So hyperpluralist theory really highlights how our system can be or can have a certain level of gridlock. Competing interests are represented, but there are too many, and gridlock is created. So you have all of these different groups vying for power, and there are so many groups vying for people's attention and votes and monetary support that it's going to be very difficult for any one group to get anything done. Mass communications create an information glut. All of these groups trying to get their message out there. We have the 24/7 news cycle. We have Twitter. We have Facebook. We have so many different outlets today. It makes it really difficult for clear, concise messages. Again, the idea that too much democracy makes for a very inefficient and undirected system. And again, we will talk about how the Madisonian system creates these checks and balances in order to kind of limit tyranny, but it also places a great check on the quick movement of any type of legislation or policy. Decisions seldom get made, and a lot of times they're muddled by conflicting purposes, because you'll have a lot of give and take and a lot of push and pull from different groups. And it is very critical. It's a pessimistic view of our pluralist system. All right. I am so happy that you took the opportunity to watch this video. That's a quick snapshot of a good chunk of Chapter 1. If you could now go ahead and complete the Google Docs form, that would be wonderful. Thanks for watching.